This section, everyone who knows me knows that I love to play tennis, and I've played for quite a few years. This story is titled, The Tennis Racket Was to Blame. One time I was playing in a tournament and I happened to know the guy, and so I remember his name. His name was R.L. Pei, and we were playing, and he was a pretty powerful player, but I was beating him. And when he missed a particular shot, he took his racket, which was a wood racket. This would have been back about 1978, 79. He took his racket and he just whacked it on the ground and just beat it to a pulp. It was all twisted and had little pieces, and said, if I can't play any blankety blank better than that, then I quit. And I thought, you probably should. Another time, I'll title this one, Ty Tire Takes a Direct Hit. We used to play tennis. You've heard of this, I guess. We used to play tennis over at the old Salt Lake Tennis Club, and they would put up a couple of bubbles in the winter, and we would buy time over there, and we'd play it from 6 till 7:30 a certain day of the week. And it was Ty Tire and Bruce Smith and Brent Hanks and I. Sometimes Craig Fairclough would trade off. And we were playing one time, and Ty, you'd have to know Ty, but he's such a tease and such a totally funny, amusing guy. And it just happened that he got hit with a tennis ball right where you don't want to get hit. And he kind of staggered and bounced off of the side of the bubble and fell over, and we thought he was teasing. He was actually in a lot of pain, but that didn't matter. We could not contain ourselves. We were just laughing like crazy, and he was dying. Anyway, we kind of got over it, but that was a little tennis experience. Actually, in 1988, I got invited to play with a friend of mine called Terry Naylor. Claire Naylor's brother called and said, how would you like to play tennis with Ken Rosewall and Rod Laver? And I said, are you kidding? He says, no, the tennis legends are coming into town, sponsored by our insurance company, and they have a pro-amateur event up at the Canyon Racket Club. Anyway, I got a chance to play with Rod Laver and Ken Rosewall and Roy Emerson, and there were a bunch of others. They're all over age 50, and they were a lot of fun. I got a couple of cross-court winners on Ken Rosewall, and then one time I was the partner with Rod Laver, and there was an overhead that came up, and I was going to really impress Rod Laver, so I just took a great big swing at it and hit a home run way past the baseline, and he looked at me and said, geez, I could have done that. It was pretty fun. Just recently in September, I had played with a guy at work that's new. He found out that I played tennis, and he played high school tennis, and so he was anxious to play. We played one day at noon just for one set, and we actually didn't even get in a full set. We went to 5-5, and then he edged me in a tiebreaker. And then he didn't seem too anxious to play again. And I said, well, we'll have to play again. He said, well, okay. And so we played again about 2 weeks later in the evening after work, and we had a little more time, and it was just about a shutout, almost a no-hitter. I beat him 6-0, 6-2, and he was a little shocked. He thought that he was going to be able to take me every time once he'd edged me in the tiebreaker, and but we haven't played since, although I don't think he's really that afraid. We just haven't played again. Well, those are just a couple of quick tennis experiences, and we'll go on to a section for hunting and deer hunting stories. This is the story of the rock rolling deer hunter. One time, one of the young men that I was involved with when we were first married, this would have been about 1975, 74, right in there. Elroy Vogler, I asked him if he was going deer hunting, and he said, no, I don't have a gun, and I don't have any clothes. And I said, well, I can help. I can get you a gun if you can get some boots, and we'll get you a license. Why don't you come with me? He said, okay. He was kind of for his age, 16, he was kind of a young and slight of build. I think he weighed about 105 pounds. Anyway, we went hunting, went up East Canyon, and after initial light, and we hadn't seen anything, I said, well, let's go up this canyon, and you go up the open side, the south face, and I'll go up this thicker side with the trees and brush, and if and maybe I can scare something out to you. And sometimes, if I knew that nobody was there, I would roll rocks, and I rolled a couple of rocks. One of them was about a 60-pound rock, and it bounded down. It was kind of a steep hill, mostly scrub oak, and I didn't know till later, but the rock rolling was part of the deer hunt. As I went up, I got a little ahead of Elroy, and I heard a couple of shots, and I thought, "Oh, good, maybe you got a shot, maybe you got a deer." So I circled around, and about 45 minutes later, I came down, and sure enough, he had actually quite a large 2-point that was down, and he said, "Oh, I was just standing there. There was this deer, and he was acting like he was stuck in the bushes, and he couldn't go anywhere. So I shot him." I said, "Oh, good." And we got looking, and right on his back, right behind his shoulders, that rock, one of those rocks I had rolled, it apparently bounced high and landed right on his backbone, and either paralyzed him temporarily or something until Elroy could shoot him. Probably a good thing, because I don't know how good of a shot he was, but we drug that deer out, and he actually got his picture in the paper because we got out so early, about 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. He had a nice big picture. It said, "Elroy Vogler bags this fine buck." It had Elroy, the deer, the back end of my car, and I was nowhere to be found. Later, the next year, we went archery hunting, Elroy and a couple of us, and similar thing again. I went through some trees in a section down by Fish Lake and spooked out a really big deer, a big 5-point, about a 28-incher, and it was going right up toward Elroy, and we were archery hunting, so it was much more difficult. And I watched Elroy up on the hill, and the deer couldn't see him, but he started heading right up toward him. And then all of a sudden the deer stopped, and then he bolted. He was about 200 yards from me, and so I thought, "Oh, good, maybe he got a shot." Went up there, and Elroy said, "Cole, did you see that deer?" And I said, "Yes, I did. Did you get a shot?" And he said, "Well, I was walking along, and I just looked over, and there was this great big deer looking at me, so I tried to hide, and then he ran." And I said, "Well, of course he ran. He saw you." What was funny was that year, that fall, his father bought an old pickup truck from the state, and they went on the rifle hunt. They went right back to that same area, and the Sunday after opening day, Elroy came up, and he had a smile about that wide. I knew he'd shot a deer, but I really didn't even know he was going back down there, and he had shot that deer, great big 28-inch 5-point, and a great big buck. Kind of a neat little story. This little story is, I'll just title it Eyeball to Eyeball. When I was bow hunting back in the 70s and late 60s, went up to East Canyon one time to scout the deer for the rifle hunt just the week before, and it was early morning. Got up there above one of the meadows above Little Dell Reservoir, and I have binoculars with me. Looked across, and there were a couple of deer, a couple of small 2-points and some does. And one of the 2-points, he was just there on the side, and all of a sudden he must have gotten a smell of me, and he got spooked, and he came running right toward me. And I had my binoculars up, and I was looking at him, and I was watching him. He was coming right down the trail, and I was kneeling down right by a bush, and I was kneeling down. He kept coming. He looked like he was just about to step on me, and I put the binoculars down and stood up, and he was right on me. He was 10 feet away, and he went down and bounced up and went like he'd seen a ghost. It was kind of fun to see that. One time in 1985, Bruce Smith and I were hunting, and it had snowed about a foot deep, and we were hunting up in East Canyon, and he wanted to shoot this little 2-point that I pointed out to him. I saw it before he did. There were 3 deer, and so I was watching through my scope while he was shooting, and he shot a couple of times and missed, but the deer didn't move because the bullets were going into the snow and they were muffled. And I was watching, and I was watching through my scope, had it dialed in to 9 power, and I was watching the deer, and as he shot, the deer's ear just went like that. I said, "You got him, Smith!" And he didn't go down, but on the next shot he did go down. And when we went up there and cleaned him, that ear had the bullet had gone right through the top of the cartilage, and when I saw that ear flap back, he had hit the deer, sure enough. One time when Dallas and Andy Clegg and I were hunting, and they were 15 because it was their first year they could hunt, and we were up in East Canyon in a good favorite spot, and we'd hunted, we'd seen a few deer, and I don't think we'd taken any shots, and it was one of the midweek days that we were there. And in the early afternoon, I said, "You guys go up around this bowl and I'll come across the canyon. Maybe I'll scare something out to you." So I gave him a 20-minute head start, and then I started across the canyon. I wasn't being unusually quiet, but I guess I was being quiet enough, and it was kind of steep, a little trail I was on. And as I was going along, there was a mahogany bush that had some just canes with no leaves on that stuck up. And I looked, and I thought, and all of this happened in just a second. I said, "Oh, somebody's left their deer under that bush." And I thought, "Oh, they've propped it up, so it looks like he's alive." And I thought, "Oh, he is alive." He was a little 2-point, about like this. His ears were down. He was relaxed, and I thought, "Wow, he's right there." I knew I wasn't going to shoot him, so he just wasn't very big, and so I thought I took a rock and I threw it up over the bush, and it landed 20 feet in front of him, and he still didn't do anything. And so I thought, I'm just gonna lean over there and spit right on this deer to say he was that close. So I leaned over and spit on him, and he didn't move. And I thought I had forgotten that I had the camera in my pack, or I would have just taken it out and jumped out in front of him and taken his picture. I could have jumped on his back and stabbed him if I wanted to take the chance. But I thought, well, I'll signal to Dallas and Andy. So our signal for a buck is we get their attention, and then we go like this, representing horns. And so I did that, and Dallas and Andy started to come down through the brush. It was kind of low brush, about waist high, and I backed off of the deer as far as I could, about 50 feet. Watched the deer, watched Andy and Dallas, and finally the deer got alerted. He heard them, and when they got about 120 yards away, he jumped up, and he had apparently been shot or hurt, because he was about 80% of normal strength. He was still pretty fast, but he just got up kind of slowly, and off he ran. Dallas and Andy shot a couple of shots, and he was gone. They missed him, and away he went. I have one remaining deer story. In about 1975, I took my nephew Mark Thorne up bow hunting with me up to East Canyon again, and I had in my car a spotlight, a cigarette plug-in type spotlight, and on the way down the canyon, he was shining that around, and apparently he shined it in somebody's car next to us, and immediately that car got right behind us and just tailgated us all the way down the canyon, and they never left us. They didn't, and I was dropping Mark off at his grandmother and grandfather Thorne's house, and they followed us all the way home and right into the driveway. So I said to Mark, "Stay in the car here, I'll go out and see what this guy wants to do." So I got out and started to walk up, and it was real dark, and the guy had his window down, and before I said, "What do you want to do?" And he said, he looked at me and he said, "Aren't you Ted Nelson?" And I said, "Yes, I am. Who are you?" He says, "Never mind about that." He says, "I didn't like that light shining in my car." And I said, "Well, who are you?" And he never did tell me. He didn't get out, and he just drove off. And so if he had any intention of having a fight or punching me or something, he turned tail and away he went. And he was a mysterious guy. Never did know who that was. And that's the end of the deer stories.